next guest is Mr. Jeffrey Clayton. He's the executive director of the American Bail Coalition. They're a trade organization that's committed to developing the most efficient means for the pretrial release of criminal defendants by reducing the financial impact on the government and taxpayers while maximizing public safety. You can learn more by visiting ambailcoalition.org. That's ambailcoalition.org. Is it Jeff or Jeffrey?
Jeff.
Jeff, welcome to the program, sir. How are you doing this evening?
I'm well. Thanks for having me on.
Very good. Absolutely. So it's an interesting job that you're working on there, because I guess, so right now, tell me how this fits into the picture right now, where, I mean, look at New York and the lawlessness and the number of crimes being committed by these repeat offenders that are just, it's catch and release constantly. So how does that work?
Well, absolutely. And New York changed their bail reform laws to where judges don't have discretion to set bail in certain cases, no matter how many times they do it. And that's why you see all these issues in New York. They tried to roll it back twice, and they still haven't gotten there. I think, where does it fit in right now? I think it's definitely turning into a major election issue, not just in New York, but elsewhere. And it really comes down to two things, which is that the entire system, for whatever reason, is not deterring crime anymore. And, we can get into what the causes for that are, but I think that's the state where we find ourselves, and most people in the public are saying, not how did we get here, but what can we do to rein in the crime?
And so how does what you're doing help?
Well, requiring bail in the pretrial context is one more component of deterrence. There's two things that deter crime: the certainty of getting caught and the swiftness of the punishment. And so perception makes a lot of difference. And if defendants will get stuck in jail, or at least won't know until they go before the judge, they're not going to risk getting arrested. So it's just one link in the chain of criminal deterrence is what the bail system is. And when we tell criminals, hey, you can do it all you want, and you're never going to have to go to jail, and you're never going to have to post bail, look what happens.
Right. So that's not what you're advocating for.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, I think New York had actually a fairly good bail system prior to the reforms, which we argued for many reasons. The bails were low, the appearance rates were high, the release rates were high. There just wasn't a reason to go down this road.
Right. So why did they?
Well, bail reform was popular at the time, and New York has never allowed for the detention of defendants, by just denying bail like, they can do in New Jersey. So it was just popular at the time, and, within 3 months, they were back to trying to repeal it. So it didn't go well from the beginning in 2019, and it hasn't gone well since.
And what is it exactly that you guys are trying to do?
Well, I think we support, candidate Zeldin's position that the reform should be repealed. So we feel like New York judges, when you look at the rest of the country, comparing it to California or other places, we're doing a pretty good job of creating the right balance between public safety, but focusing on where the real problem is, which is recidivists. 5% of defendants commit 60% of all violent crimes. That's just reality, and those are the population that we need to focus on.
That's a really high number. And so what do you do about that part of the population when it comes to bail?
Well, you have to be able to consider their priors, and you have to be able to set a bail. Example, this is the 10th time this month, right? And in New York, that doesn't matter because it's crime-based. And so if that's just on the no bail list, then they can do it a million times. And that's not the right answer, right? It's looking at the two things that correlate with pretrial failures, which is they didn't show up in court before, or they have a lengthy rap sheet. That's what judges need to be able to look at and have the freedom to set the right balance, whether it's bail or releasing them on their own recognizance or whatever the case may be.
Well, I mean, that seems pretty simple. It seems common sense, if you would. So why is that so difficult?
Well, because the legislators at the time thought that judges were setting bails too high and that there were too many low-level defendants in jail. And what we actually came to find out in New York and elsewhere is that, the average defendant that doesn't post a misdemeanor bail has 10 prior strikes against them, a combination of criminal convictions, felonies, and misdemeanors, and failures to appear in court. So while it is true that there are people on low-level bails on low-level crimes, they're really not low-level criminals. And that's the distinction that we didn't figure out in New York.
That is a good distinction. And I guess that's a good way to put it as well. And so so right now, for instance, if they failed to show up, if they had a court date that they failed to show up for, I mean, then wouldn't a warrant be issued for their arrest?
Yes, but ultimately it doesn't matter because if it's still on the no bail list, they still can't do bail. So, that's another little problem, is that if you can not do bail now, you can not do bail ever. And that's why you literally had a guy on his 135th arrest thanking the legislators in Albany for this law.
So he can never be required to post bail, is what you're saying?
Yes, if they're on the no bail list of charges for which bail cannot be imposed, it doesn't matter. And that's the whole problem.
Okay,
right?
so it's not the person that's on the list; it's the crime that they committed.
Yes. So shoplifting, example, right? Doesn't matter. Do it 100 times, do it 150 times, doesn't matter. And that's not how it should work, right? It's not the crime itself, it's the behavior of the criminal that we're looking at, right? That's critical because we know this little population is the one that's harming all of us.
Wow. And so what are you guys doing to make a difference there then? How are you impacting this?
Well, I think there's been legislation that's passed in Texas that has resulted in a 10.6% decrease in pretrial crime in Houston. And it's really just
And what was that legislation? What was that?
Yeah, really it's the opposite of New York. It's a list of circumstances for which you cannot get a free bail. To say that, no, we are not going to give free passes under these cases. And what was happening in Houston is you had a group of 32 defendants who were out on 8 or more felony bonds without having to post bail. And the district attorney was like, enough is enough. And so that law in the first year is having a dramatic impact, particularly on people that have the lengthiest records, right? Those are the ones that are getting ensnared. Those are the ones that are having to post bail. Those are the ones that are getting stuck in jail. And that's what we want. That's what we want.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. And so how long has your organization been around?
For 20 years, we've been working on this. So we've seen a lot of ebbs and flows over that time period.
How successful have you been in what you're trying to get done?
Well, my job is to protect the Eighth Amendment right to bail first, and then the right to commercial bail as a personal choice for defendants to make. And we've been very successful at defending the constitutional right to bail and not giving up to these policies of either catch and release or policies of, we're just going to lock everybody up and deny bail, like is what's happening in New Jersey. And
so is there a party that tends to respond in a more positive way to you?
Yeah, I would say it's really dependent on the period of time that we're in. And right now, I'd say the Republican Party is more receptive to our message. Over time in history, Democrats have been more receptive to our message, particularly when governments begin to, in the times like right now, we just want to lock everybody up. We will take shortcuts and just start saying we're going to deny bail, and that's when the message resonates more with Democrats that, the current bail system that we've had for 250 years does create a pretty good balance, regardless of what party you're in.
Well, I know that families want safe streets. I mean, they want to know that their loved one is going to get home from work, that their kids are going to get home from school, and that they won't be the victim of crimes, whether they're petty crimes or serious crimes. And in New York, a lot of these crimes have been serious. They have been. And I think, the real game here is violent offenders, repeat violent offenders. That's what we have to focus on. That's what's going to keep our streets safe. It's not a lot of this other stuff. I mean, look at what happened in front of Lee Zeldin's house. I mean, he's running for governor of New York, right? There's a drive-by shooting, and people are actually killed in his front yard.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, he was attacked at a campaign rally as well. So, his family's been victims of crime. He's been victims of crime throughout this entire campaign.
This kind of thing happens in third world countries. You do not expect this to happen in the United States.
No, I think we're better than that, but we're going to have to prove it once again.
It's a little scary where we are at this point in time. What state do you reside in, sir?
I'm in Colorado.
Colorado. And so Colorado tends to be a little more on the lenient side, don't they?
They do, except, in the rural areas, definitely not. But in Denver, we're having the same problem where prior felons in possession of firearms are getting out on $0, $1, and $2 bonds. And that's just causing a major uptick in gun violence in Denver.
Well, that's your home state.
I know. So we need to go down to the legislature and see if we can get something done.
So what are you doing there?
Well, a bill was run last year to fix this, and the Democratic majority killed it. To say no, you don't get a $0, $1, or $2 bail if you're a prior felon in possession of a firearm, which is a federal crime, by the way. So, yeah, we'll have to see if the composition changes or the attitude changes toward all of this.
Is it looking positive?
I think so. I think there's great sympathy for low-level offenders. Obviously, the whole marijuana thing in Colorado came and went, so that there's no low-level drug possessors. So I think the good message is let's focus on recidivist violent defendants. Everybody agrees on that. Gun charges in particular, weapons charges. Let's focus on that. Everybody agrees on that, and that'll move the ball forward.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being a guest in the program this evening. Sir, I do have one more question for you, and that would be, what is your favorite charity?
Probably Red Cross, just because they do all the international work they do around the world.
They do. All right. Well, you have a great evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
You as well. Thank you.
Bye-bye.